one of these three fantastic comedians. Let's talk to him right now. What's up, y'all? How y'all doing tonight? Looking good.
In May of 2025, Dropout TV released the crowd control episode of Game Changer. The mechanics of this episode's game revolve around three stand-up comedians performing crowd work on an audience of about 20 people. At the start of the second round, half of the audience would remove their shirts, revealing prompts for the comedians. The third round would have the rest of the audience remove their shirts, revealing riskier prompts. On September 8th, Crowd Control officially debuted as its own show, hosted by Jaquise Neal. Crowd Control ran for 6 episodes, and audience casting calls for a second season have already been announced. The show overall has been a very mixed experience. Some episodes knock it out of the park with the comedy material, while others feel like they suffer from poor editing choices and a runtime that feels a little too short. The show also adds an additional round to the game where Jaquise puts extra rules on comics to change things up. This extra round has had varying degrees of success. On the high end, we have things like Brennan Lee Mulligan being banned from using big words or literary references, and on the low end, we have Moshe Kasher ranting for 5 minutes about building a new civilization. Despite its shortcomings, I personally think the central premise of the show remains very strong. It has potential for some very funny moments, and hearing people's stories can be pretty interesting. However, the show has far more variables at play than most other Dropout productions. The most obvious one, of course, is the audience. Crowd Control is unique in that it's the only show Dropout tapes in front of a live studio audience. The audience being the central mechanic of the show also means that producers have less control over the direction of the episode compared to other shows. I am going to take the time in this video to address what I believe are the 3 central pillars of Crowd Control. The first is, of course, the audience, which includes audience stories and their interactions with comics. The second is the comics, which includes the comedians themselves and how they handle different situations. And the final pillar is the production, which includes the more granular details like editing, production, and Jaquise himself. Each of these have good and bad values attached, and I'm going to get fairly in-depth with them. Let's start with that first one, the audience.
So, you cheated on your ex.
I did.
Is this the ex you cheated on?
Yeah. It wasn't his fault, it was me.
Yeah, of course it was your fault.
The audience is an important part of any stand-up routine, even ones that don't involve crowd work. The audience's reaction to certain jokes can help the comic gauge how the set is going. A good and energetic audience feeds into the energy of the comic, thus producing a better show. An audience that is low energy and appears upset with certain jokes can make the comic uncomfortable or uneasy. Crowd work can be used to help build a connection with the audience, and it can offer a bit of variety for performers who do identical sets every night to different crowds. In the modern era, it's also an easy source of social media clips for things like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. If a comic posts a piece of their regular routine to social media, and someone goes to their show because of that clip, they'll be disappointed when they hear that joke at the show because they already heard it on the internet. Crowd work material is unique to each show and audience and can demonstrate a comic's talent and style without showing off any of their regular material. Crowd Control adds an extra dimension to this dynamic by turning the audience into the main source of material. By making the audience the central mechanic of the show, it demands quicker thinking from the comics and turns the audience into performers as well. The show has the side effect of giving audience members their 15 minutes of fame, so to speak. Some people handle those 15 minutes gracefully by adding to bits in creative ways. Others panic in the moment and don't land their jokes. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Nervousness is a perfectly understandable trait in a situation like this. Most regular everyday people don't have improv or camera training, and putting them on the spot can make them uncomfortable. While it is true that they did sign up to be on the show, and they did specifically apply for it, failure is always an option. Take this clip from episode 1, for example. This takes place at the end of the episode during the final round. This is the scene I mentioned earlier where Brennan can't speak with big words or use literary references. When he comes on stage, his first words are the following.
I can't say the word on your shirt.
The audience member, whose name is Naomi, then elaborates. Naomi tells Brennan that she plays 24 instruments. When Brennan asks why she plays so many instruments, this happens.
Why so much sounds?
I don't know if you would understand.
Don't do show. Let me do show. You do your job.
This is an example of audience material gone right. It's a short comic that was made by riffing in the moment, and it builds on the current bit. Brennan is then able to build off of it by jokingly chastising her for doing his job. Let's take a look at another clip. This one is from episode 4.
AE, I love your top. It's very colorful, but you have the rainbow wrists and the rainbow hood, and the rest of it is not rainbow. And I wanted to know if only your head and wrists are gay.
I mean, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
This was an attempt at a riff, but it comes across as forced. While audience members adding their own jokes can be funny, their job is not to provide their own material. They are the setup so the comic can deliver a punchline. AE, to her credit, does take the shot a second time later in the episode, and this time she lands it.
All told jokes right before we died.
Are you comedians?
9 knows I am not.
Instead of trying to tell her own joke, AE builds on the current one. She also makes a callback to earlier when Guy Branum explained what she did wrong to the audience.
Okay. Sam, here's what AE did right, here's what AE did wrong. All right? I asked the question, and AE let it sit, okay? AE let there be a moment of drama and concern. We all wanted to know what was going on. And then AE attempted to do, let's be honest, material. At a crowd work show, AE!
The majority of audience members don't try to riff or tell their own jokes. They just tell their stories and let the comics do their jobs. Ideally, that is how it should work. Remember, audience is the setup so the comic gets a punchline. And most of the stories that audience members have are fairly interesting. AE, the woman who definitely isn't a comedian, her and her partner have both died and been revived. Naomi plays so many instruments because she's a composer for movies and video games. However, there are some audience stories that on the surface aren't interesting or just straight up boring. Let's take this woman for example. Her shirt just says collector, and later she tells Gianmarco that she collects fountain pens. Now, personally, I didn't find this to be very interesting. I mean, it's pens. It's an interesting fun fact about someone, but I didn't think it really warranted being on the show. What turned me around, however, was this clip from the next round.
How are you related?
Oh, we're part of an 8-person trans-being kitchen table polycule that all lives together.
I assumed. What does that mean, kitchen table?
In polyamory terms, a kitchen table polycule is a polycule in which all of the people in it get along and could hypothetically share a meal or a board game around a kitchen.
As opposed to a regular polycule, no one gets along at all.
They're solo poly, where no one knows they're metamors.
Oh boy, I need a pen.
This is an example of how people with boring stories can still bring out some pretty funny bits. Most of the time it's up to the comics to go digging for them, but other times there can be riffs like this one. I bring this up because as the show was releasing, I would see discourse on Reddit about how the audience members had boring stories. While a story may seem boring on a surface level, that doesn't mean there isn't potential for a good joke to be extracted from it. It also makes sense from a production standpoint to have some less exciting audience members mixed in with the really outlandish ones. You want to space the really weird and wacky ones out over the course of a season and possibly leave some for the next season rather than front-loading them all at once. For every 8-person polycule, there's a guy whose coworker is fucking his wife. For every couple who met playing board games, there's a couple where the guy broke his penis during sex. Unfortunately, there are some stories in the show which to me personally come across as a little weird, to put it charitably. There are 2 main culprits in this section, and they are My Cousin's Willie and Exorcist. Let's start with the cousin one. In this clip, an audience member wearing a red shirt talks about how in high school they attempted to catfish their cousin.
Oh, your cousin's Willie.
Yeah, I was in high school. I catfished my cousin to get a dick pic from him.
Wow. Wow, you should jump off a cliff in Ireland.
Jaquise pulls Gianmarco off the stage at this moment, but during the final round he gets talked to a second time. He elaborates that it didn't start with his cousin. He started by attempting to catfish the guys in his school. He moved to his cousin after that operation had already begun. He also clarified that he never received any pictures from the people he catfished. And then he drops this.
What did you communicate for a little bit? Despite not getting the pic?
Just communicating, yeah.
How old were you both at the time?
I was 15 and he probably was like 19. I don't know.
Oh God! Oh my God!
Wait.
The audience reaction speaks for itself. If this was something that happened between 2, well, not consenting adults because the guy was being catfished. If this had happened between 2 adults, that would have been one thing. But the fact that one person was a teenager is what makes this really bad. And what did the cousin know? Was this guy posing as a person of legal age? Did the cousin knowingly message and flirt with a minor? Sure, pics were never exchanged, but you could still do a lot with just words. This is a very bad look for this guy. And what about his cousin who has to hear about this from a TV show?
Hey man, I'm watching a show on TV and, isn't that your cousin?
Yeah, that is him. What's he doing there?
He just admitted to trying to catfish you when he was 15.
What? Let's take a look now at Exorcist. Exorcist is an audience member who claims to have performed over 50 exorcisms in his lifetime. He is not a priest, but he claims to have a super strong aura that is hurtful to ghosts. He says that he didn't realize he had this ability until he kept going into haunted houses and accidentally unhaunting them. Christella then asks him to tell her about the worst house he's ever exorcised.
Going to a place where a ghost was sexually assaulting this person.
How do you know it's doing it?
Because she reports that there is pressure in a certain area and she's unable to get up from the bed.
Okay, let's all get one thing out of the way and say that ghosts are not real. They are only real so far as they exist as spiritual and religious constructs. So what the fuck is he talking about? After this clip ends, he talks about having a sword from his grandfather. Christella cuts him off before he finishes his thought, but it's implied that he fights ghosts by swinging a greatsword around. So he is someone who is not a priest, is not trained, and just runs around with a deadly weapon fighting imaginary ghosts. Later, he gets asked a very direct question by Atsuko about how to protect yourself from possessions, and he kind of gives a non-answer.
So how do you become not susceptible, right? We want to become not that. How do we do that?
So the way I try to do it is you try to like strengthen your aura so that there's more of a barrier around you.
I am so, there's so much to do in life already. That's how you fight against.
Yeah, there are ways that you can ward yourself against like possession and from things that you don't want coming around you.
Right. You didn't give a detail. So I'm just gonna be spooked again.
Worst case scenario, this guy's a con artist who is taking advantage of people. However, I try not to immediately think the worst of people, so let's think for a moment and say that he is a genuinely good-intentioned person who just wants to help people, and he helps people by fighting ghosts. If it helps bring people some peace in their lives, then I think that's okay. However, that doesn't account for the sword. Running around with a large, deadly bladed weapon is irresponsible and carries its own risk. But if he's being careful, and it's part of an act, for lack of better terminology, then fine. But what the fuck is up with the sexual assault? SA is a very touchy subject. Just watch how the audience reacts when he says it. Again, ghosts aren't actually real, so what is really happening behind the scenes? This feels like a really irresponsible thing for him to share publicly, especially if he didn't talk to the victim beforehand. Those two aside, the audience was generally well behaved. I saw a lot of people on Reddit complaining about the audience trying to hog the spotlight, but I truly don't think it's as bad as people paint it to be. The only audience members who I found super offensive were the two I just talked about. The rest I think can be explained as either nervousness or choices made during the final edit. So, let's move on. Let's talk about the people that bring it all together. The contestants on our show, the comics.
You are OG in the improv world, in the sketch world, in the tabletop world. So as a seasoned stand-up comedian...
I want to be clear. I didn't ask me to be here, okay?
Crowd work is a type of improv performance that has historically been absent from Dropout's usual lineup of content. Crowd work demands more from a comic than a regular stand-up routine. A good crowd work comic is able to single people out who they think have good pit potential and then work with that person to build something funny. On the surface, this may not sound dissimilar from something like an improv show, where a comic fishes for prompts and stories from the audience. However, an improv show only has the performers interact with the audience a small amount. The audience shouts out a prompt, and the performers work with what they're given to form a funny skit. Crowd work, on the other hand, builds a much closer relationship between the comic and the audience member because the comic needs to keep fishing for details and information from the person to build their own jokes. When casting for the Game Changer episode, Dropout chose 3 comics who they had never worked with before. They largely continued that practice in Crowd Control. The skill set for crowd work is similar to regular improv work, but it demands things from the performers that Dropout's usual lineup might not have. For example, Brendan Lee Mulligan is a better pick for crowd control than someone like Josh Rubin. Josh is not a stand-up comic in the traditional sense, nor is he a crowd worker. He is a character actor. While I'm sure he could figure out a way to make things work in crowd control, it wouldn't be the strongest usage of his talents. This section is not going to function as a ranking of everyone's performance. Comedy is subjective and... Chase, what the fuck is this? Comedy is subjective, and no two comics are alike. Everyone has their favorites. What I would like to do instead is take a look at a few of the comics which really stood out to me and discuss them. If you're really curious about my overall rankings, then scroll back to when that tier list was on screen. For now, let's talk about our first comic. Baron Vaughn opens his set with what I think is the funniest joke in the whole show.
It's hard to talk about race sometimes with my white therapist. Like the other day, we were talking about race, and he said, you know, I think at the end of the day, you really need to look inward. And I was like, what'd you call me?
That joke took me out for a solid minute or so. The wordplay there is just absolutely genius. Like, fuck, I wish I could have written that myself. Baron has a lot of jokes about race in his act, but it isn't the primary focus. He comes off as a sort of awkward theater kid during his routine. He fumbles the mic stand, he attempts to compose a sonnet, and he has a very tight sequence of goofy jokes.
I used to live in the Orlando area, and I tend to like really tall men. So I dated 3 goofies.
Whoa! You guys, don't clap. They all tragically fell off of cliffs. And they all went, oh, the entire...
What made Baron stand out to me personally was the final round. This episode had one of the better premises for the final round. Jaquise had this thing called the bucket of bits, where he would pull out a bit and the comic had to perform their set with that bit in mind. One of the bits he pulled for Baron was to do his set in song.
Trying to find out who I want to talk to in this crowd. I'm gonna do my thing high and loud.
He has a very lovely singing voice, and I really wanted to hear more of his set like this. Unfortunately, he was kneecapped by the editing of the show and by Jaquise. Baron starts talking to some people, and after they tell him their story, he immediately gets pulled out and Kieran replaces him. For now, just know that Baron has a lovely singing voice, and he made my favorite joke of the whole season. Guy Branum's first joke after walking on stage is another favorite of mine. It's about a member of the audience who has incredibly rosy cheeks.
Young man, what is your name?
Sam.
Sam, I am uncomfortable with the rosiness level of your cheeks.
I'm so sorry.
This morning you were clearly like, let me put on the teal. Let's turn these cheeks into headlights.
Guy Branum is someone who has clearly been doing this for a very long time. He's a very experienced comic, and he absolutely knows his way around crowd work. He knows his way around so well that he spends most of the show teaching the audience how to be good crowd work participants. I mentioned earlier how he lectured AE about doing material at a crowd work show, though that isn't the only time he goes on a tangent like that.
First of all, Phoenix, I want to say you're amazing at the audience part of crowd work. Phoenix always leaves you wanting more, always leaving you with a question, a shadow you want to investigate. The rest of you are just vomiting out your sad, pathetic lives. How sad were you when you pulled off your little overcoats and things and you had already told your whole fucking board game couple story? And there are 2 of you and you have the same fucking shirt. You have nothing. You have blown your load.
These moments are kind of fun and demonstrate Guy's understanding of comedy and crowd work specifically. I found Guy to be one of the stronger acts in the show because of this. However, I have to admit there were a few times where I was a little uncomfortable with the way he talked to the audience. Let me put it this way. My father can be a genuinely funny guy. However, he has a very dry and sarcastic sense of humor, and he can occasionally cross a line into being a little hurtful or mean. I'm happy to sit at home and laugh at Guy Branum ragging on these people, but I know that if I was there and he was doing it to me, I would not be having a good time. An interesting facet of the show is how the comics are able to build off of each other from the sidelines, even when it isn't their turn to perform. In a regular stand-up show, these kinds of interjections could be taken as rude or spotlight hogging, but in the case of crowd control, it can be used to build onto the bit. The comic I found to have the strongest interjections was Bob the Drag Queen.
Do you do adult baby stuff?
No.
Oh, okay.
Why would you say that?
A decent part of Bob's routine also involves jokes about the gay community. This isn't surprising considering he's a drag queen. He's been immersed in the community for long enough that he is able to craft jokes about niche sectors of the community. One of my editor's favorite jokes from his set is where he talks about the difference between a gold and platinum gay.
They cut you open from hip to open you up, right? And then they pull your abs apart like beef jerky, and then they take your kidneys, clamp it to your vagina, open up the placenta, and then pull this little baby out. And then, after that, 30 years later, some fucking gay boy walks around and goes, "I never touched a pussy, ha ha ha."
This final section is for some of my favorite jokes from comics who I didn't want to write a whole thing about. Instead of taking the time to overanalyze all of these, I'm just gonna play them all at once.
You're a Disney princess.
Oh my God. Hello. Hi. How are you?
I'm good. Mine's Ryan.
I'm Aurora Borealis.
Did I accurately assess you? That's what you do for work, professional dominatrix? Okay. Unfortunately, I'm a pleasure top. It's not gonna really work out unless we want to boss each other around in a room, just stare at each other, do commands, and just brat each other out till we come.
I recently had a hysterectomy, and yes, thank you so much. My favorite thing to do is ask men what a hysterectomy is. My favorite answer is a dude was like, "That's when they take your coochie out." I was like, he's not wrong.
What's your name and height?
My name is Rye. I'm 4'9".
No, you're not.
I am.
4'9"? I would have guessed 5'1".
That means a lot to me.
Overall, the lineup chosen for the season was very strong. Even the people who I didn't think were noteworthy had some funny jokes. I chose these three to focus on because I felt I had the most to say about them compared to the others. Which brings us now to our final pillar, the part of the show that is the least directly observable, but has the greatest impact on the viewers at home. It's time to talk about the nitty-gritty details of the production.
Swan Solo.
It's supposed to be swam solo?
Yes.
What's the budget on this fucking production?
The production is the part of the show that will have the most tangible impact for the viewers at home. The comics and audience can have all the fun they want during taping, but everyone else is at the mercy of the editors, writers, and other folks associated with the production of the show. Things that play well for the live audience won't play the same for your fat ass on your couch. We also don't have the full context for the show because there are plenty of things that don't make the final cut. Let's start by addressing the editing. According to this Reddit comment from an audience member, the show taped for about 90 minutes. The median runtime for episodes is around 37 minutes, which means on average there's close to an hour of content being cut. Most of that is probably cutting out pauses in the conversations, various ums and uhs, and other parts of dead air. The rest of that, however, would include audience members whose stories weren't funny enough or that the comics didn't spend enough time with. The editors also take liberties with the flow of conversations as well. That comment alleges that his conversation with Leah Rudick was cut down by at least half and that the conversation ended differently. Sometimes this meddling with the flow of conversation is necessary to produce the funniest outcome, but it can also do people really dirty.
You've heard me. What does that mean? How do you know?
For 10 plus years, I've been a professional voice actor.
Okay. Now, what would I have heard you say?
Oh, it's all sorts of things. If you played games...
I've played games.
Okay. Are you good at video games? Ooh.
I beg your pardon?
Because that determines...
Oh, are you the old final boss only voice?
It's not just that. It could be commercials. It could be documentaries. Like, I could do the commercial for
Will
Ami's
you give
tattoo
me one
business.
fucking thing that I've heard you do?
Okay. What do you play? What's your genre?
Red Dead Redemption 2.
Not in that.
You're not in that one?
Not in that.
I think some of these shirts are lies, I'm realizing.
Now, watching this clip, you might be upset with this guy. It feels like he's trying to play games with Paul, and he's not actually answering any of his questions. However, that isn't quite how things went. The Dropout subreddit identified this guy as Sean Chiplock, and after digging, I found some of his posts on Blue Sky about the episode. His posts already painted a bit of a different picture, and I decided to reach out to him for some additional information. After a short conversation, I came away with a much different understanding of this event. Sean did try to name the games he was in, but Paul didn't know any of them. He tried to change gears midway through and ask Paul what he plays, but when Paul said Red Dead, he hit a wall. The real conversation between him and Paul probably went something like this.
Will you give me one fucking thing that I've heard you say?
Okay, I'm in Breath of the Wild, Persona 5, Borderlands 4.
I haven't played those.
You haven't played any of them?
Nope.
Fire Emblem?
Nope.
Guilty Gear Strive?
Nope.
What do you play? What's your genre?
Red Dead Redemption 2.
I'm not in that one.
You're not in that?
No.
I think some of these shirts might be lies.
The issues with Sean's appearance do not stem from Sean himself. It's not his fault if Paul doesn't recognize anything he's in, even if he is a Troy Baker level voice actor. The first issue is, of course, the editing. To quote Sean himself in our messages, cringe comedy is still comedy. The rest of his interaction with Paul was pretty uneventful, so the editors did their best to pull something out of it. The second issue is the producers, who put 2 voice actors in the same taping. Before Paul talked to Sean, John Marco talked to a woman who made baby noises for The Incredibles when she was a toddler. Ideally, these 2 people should have been in separate tapings. By the time Paul got to Sean, he was already thinking that he didn't need to be picked because the show already covered his topic. The missteps with Sean's appearance should have made the editors reconsider keeping his section. I truly think it would have been better if they had omitted Sean's segment, and Sean seems to think so too from what he told me. Editing for content is one thing, but the moment-to-moment editing is also a little funky. The show is littered with cuts that feel jarring and out of sync. The most prolific example is cuts where audience applause suddenly stops in ways that feel jarring. There are also moments where jokes can get picked up and dropped on a whim. The most glaring example to me was this clip from the final round of episode 2.
Okay, I want to break this couple up. Okay, let's see. So you're new to the group. Yeah, right. Okay.
So here's how it's going to go. All right, Michaelmas. That is an obscure holiday, a religious holiday.
Yeah.
When Paul comes up to the mic there, it feels as if he is going to continue the bit, but then it cuts to him doing something else. There are many clips in the show like this, but I've chosen to focus on this one because I think it is the most easily explained. What I believe happened is Paul came up to the mic, said something, and it ended up not being funny. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with dropping the occasional bomb. The problem is, because of the way this final round works, the editors need to establish continuity with Paul coming to the mic. If Jamie was on the mic and they cut directly to Paul without establishing the changeover, that would have been a far worse cut. What we have isn't great, but it isn't terrible either. It's what the editor had to work with, and you can't polish shit. Let's change gears now and start talking about the big man himself, Jaquise Neal. Jaquise has been a recurring presence on Dropout for the past few years. His oldest appearance is in Season 1 of Make Some Noise. Jaquise's role in crowd control is a very complicated one. He has to wrangle 3 different comedians, monitor the crowd, and he can't be funnier than the comics. As the MC of the show, his own jokes shouldn't overshadow the comics on stage. He does have his own moments, but for the most part he sticks to facilitating the game itself rather than trying to riff. Or at least that's what we see in the final cut. The show's credits have some cut content sprinkled into them, and some of those clips include clips with Jaquise.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for you to put your seatbelts on. Remember, if the masks come down, put yours on first. We are gonna get to our destination in one piece. If you need some free peanuts, talk to me. Or if you need some loving, talk to me.
I wouldn't be surprised if there were more interactions between Jaquise and the audience that we don't get to see. It's good for Jaquise to crack jokes between sets during the taping to keep the audience engaged, but that stuff gets cut for the final edit because the show isn't about him. His job is not to be the 4th comic, his job is to be the host. This isn't an idea unique to crowd control. Sam Reich also doesn't crack many jokes during Make Some Noise or Game Changer. He absolutely will chime in time to time with a joke or a quip or to make fun of his contestants, but that isn't his job as a host. If you want to get pretentious, you can also look at Whose Line, which is where just about every modern improv game show draws inspiration from. Drew Carey doesn't interfere with the people on stage, he just feeds them prompts. This is for the best because Drew isn't a comedian. Jaquise is different from Sam and Drew because he is a comedian. However, that doesn't stop him from making bad jokes or mistiming an interaction. For one thing, he's made the exact same Kenny Loggins reference for 5 straight episodes.
It's time to call the Yacht Rock King himself, Mr. Kenny Loggins. I think it's time for us to call our mom's favorite yacht rocker. And it's time to go a place where only me and the Yacht Rock King himself, Kenny Loggins, comfortably reside. We're about to celebrate us home. It's time to get footloose. These are all just Kenny Loggins songs. It's time for the Danger Zone!
He also jumps in from time to time to push the comics in certain directions. There have been one or two instances where he'll call to a comic while they're on stage and push them to interact with a certain audience member. These directions are usually limited to the final round. I suspect he does this to make sure everyone gets a chance to share their stories, even if it doesn't make the final cut. These people took time out of their days to be on the show, on a network they most likely are huge fans of, so they should at least have a chance to be heard. Speaking of which, let's address that final round. What separates Crowd Control from the Game Changer episode is the addition of a fourth round where Jaquise will insert extra rules to shake things up. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that this final round has had some mixed results. This tier list is my ranking of each final round. Torture the Comic is number 1 because it forces the comics to engage with the audience in ways that are tailored specifically to them. The example I showed earlier was Brennan being barred from big words and references. Bucket of Bits has the same principle, but it's beneath Torture because Jaquise's interference with the game is a little excessive. I discussed this earlier with Baron Vaughn's singing bit. Backseat Comic is an interesting premise, but I think it has too many kinks that need to be worked out. Jaquise does have some interference where he forces comics to swap in and out and talk to certain people, but it's a little more regulated than Bucket of Bits. The rest of these are nothing to write home about. Beach Ball is a fun mechanic on a surface level, but it's one of those things that's more fun for the audience than viewers at home. Connections was a very chaotic experience that is, again, more fun for the audience than for the viewers. Build Me Up Buttercup is at the bottom because it barely does anything to alter the performance. It also provides us with what I think is the weakest set in the whole show.
If Wade were to predict that the world's ending and we needed to escape, I feel that we could restart society with only the elements we've got here today. We're enough. We are enough. We're going to need a charismatic leader, obviously. I nominate myself. But we're going to need a way out, and we've got Sailor Boy right there who's going to load up the ship and say, right this way. We're going to need to repopulate this universe, and I think we know who's going to lead the fucking charge. It's definitely going to be Miss Dominatrix here telling us all that we need to get to business. It's going to be traumatic.
Build Me Up Buttercup is a game where comedians are forced to put a positive spin on everything they hear. It sounds good on paper, but in practice, it's barely distinguishable from the rest of the show. Moshe Kasher's rant about building a new civilization does have some mildly funny moments, but the lead up to it almost feels like he's grasping at straws for anything funny. I thought Moshe's performance was mid to begin with, but this put both him and this episode's final round in the bottom of their respective tier list for me. The whole game show part of Crowd Control also feels largely surface level. Most of the time when watching the show, I would forget this was a game show up until the end when Jaquise would come out with the drink ticket. I think this has to do with the fact that there isn't any method of scoring provided to us. The Game Changer episode scored comics by Sam awarding points based on how well he thought the comic connected with the audience. It was arbitrary and completely at the mercy of how much Sam liked the set, but it was something concrete that we could latch onto. Crowd Control does not have a mechanic like that. Crowd Control chooses its winners at the end of the show by Jaquise calling out each comic's name and seeing how loud the audience cheers for them. This method of winner selection feels pretty vague, and it almost feels tacked on to the end of the show. It was at this point while writing the script for this video that I started thinking of ways to change the winner selection process to feel a little less slapdash. I thought about bringing the point system back, but that wouldn't work for two reasons. The first is that Crowd Control shouldn't be a carbon copy of the Game Changer episode. Yes, they have things like the final round to shake things up, but the overall structure should change as much as possible. The second reason is that, for all its flaws, the current method does have one thing going for it. In an improv show that is centered on the audience, it makes sense that the audience should choose the winner. A point system with points awarded by Jaquise would take that power away from the audience. So, if the audience needs to remain in control and we need some kind of system to track their opinion throughout the game, let's try having them use their phones. The election episode of Game Changer had people use their phones to vote for candidates between debate rounds. However, this would take the audience attention away from the comics and put it on their phones. For example, you ever played Jackbox? It's a collection of party games. If you're internet pilled enough to be a Dropout fan, you've probably heard of it. Jackbox 7 has a game called Talking Points, which features one player getting up in front of the other players and giving a presentation. The other players rate their performance in real time by pressing the up or down arrows on their devices. At the end, those button presses get aggregated on a graph, and that graph is what awards score to the presenter. Now, I really like Talking Points. It's one of my favorite Jackbox games. However, one thing I don't like about it is the psychological element involved. When you play this game in person with other people, you become intimately aware of everything they do with their phone during the game. It isn't just whether they hit the up or down arrows, you're also paying attention to whether they're tapping their phones at all. If you put a system like this into Crowd Control, a show that demands the comedians be intensely focused on the crowd at all times, it would have the effect of psyching the comics out really badly. If a comic tells a joke and then sees people tapping on their phones, that would be incredibly distracting and upsetting. You couldn't put something like a button on the table for audience members to hit either, because the comics would still be aware of those buttons and what is done to them. So, I moved on to other ideas. I thought about pausing between each round to do the cheer test multiple times. I considered having audience members rate the comics on a scale. And the third idea is what made me realize something. The winner does not matter. Improv shows like this may be framed as game shows, but more than anything, they are comedy performances. Drew Carey opens every episode of Whose Line by saying everything is made up and the points don't matter. Having a winner at the end of the episode only serves a narrative purpose. It doesn't actually mean anything within the context of the game itself. The winner selection isn't the best, but it doesn't need to be either. We aren't watching for the winner, we're watching for the comedy.
I'm your host, Jacques Neal. Hey, remember to tip your bartenders, drive home safe, and listen, if it ain't broke, it's not really a comic. Good night, everybody! Have a good night!
Is the show bad? Well, I don't think so. There are definitely kinks that need to be worked out, but I still believe the core premise to be solid. The show as a whole is kind of a mixed bag, but that doesn't mean it's bad. And with taping for season 2 starting in a few months, I hope they have taken steps to fix some of the things that did and didn't work. But even if they don't change anything, then please, just get Jaquise a new joke. Get him to shut the fuck up about Kenny Loggins. Thank you to Ray Russell for being the only subscriber on my Patreon. Thanks for the $2. If you would also like to give me $2, then check out my Patreon at patreon.com/circle11. Please also consider subscribing to my channel and following me on Blue Sky. And if you like this video, give it a like and share it around. Thank you so much for watching and have a nice day. Alright, 12 minutes in and my throat's already starting to hurt. We're making great time! And then looks out into the audience to see people tapping on their phones. Fuck me in the mouth. Ugh. Wonder if that burp picked up on mic. While the story may seem boring on a surfing serpent. Should have held my ass up to the mic for that fart.
It keeps happening. This is the third time this week.